For decades, the Nigerian women's national football team, the Super Falcons, have been the pride of Africa and a symbol of dominance on the continent. Their history can be divided into eras, but none has sparked as much debate among fans as the comparison between the Millennium Super Falcons of the late 1990s and early 2000s and the Gen Z Super Falcons of the present day. Both generations achieved greatness in their own way. Both generations produced stars that inspired millions, and both left indelible marks on the game. But the question remains, which era was truly the greatest? The Millennium Super Falcons emerged at a time when women's football was still struggling for recognition globally. In Nigeria, resources were scarce, facilities were poor, and players had to push through unimaginable challenges to prove that women's football deserved to exist side by side with the men's game. It was during this period that names like Mercy Akide, Perpetua Nkwocha, Florence Omogbimi, Stella Mbaju, and Priska Emifu became household legends. These women were not only players, they were pioneers. They carried the burden of representing a continent and, in the process, wrote some of the most memorable chapters in African football history. The defining moment of the Millennium Falcons came in the 1999 FIFA Women's World Cup held in the United States. Against all odds, the Falcons shocked the world by advancing to the quarterfinals. It remains Nigeria's best performance at the World Cup to date. The world watched in amazement as Nigeria defeated Denmark in the group stage and then pushed Brazil to extra time in the quarterfinal, displaying grit, raw power, and an unbreakable spirit. It was a statement not just for Nigeria, but for the entire African continent. African women could stand toe-to-toe with the giants of the game. Beyond the World Cup, the Millennium Falcons dominated Africa like no other team. Between 1998 and 2006, Nigeria won nearly every edition of the Women's Africa Cup of Nations, then known as the African Women's Championship, sweeping aside rivals like Ghana, Cameroon, and South Africa with ease. Their reign was absolute. While the rest of the continent was still developing its women's game, the Falcons of that era looked untouchable. What made them special was their playing style. The Millennium Falcons were known for their direct, fearless, and physical approach. They overwhelmed opponents with sheer pace and endurance. The tactics may not have been as refined as what we see today, but what they lacked in tactical sophistication, they made up for in heart and determination. They ran, fought, and played with a ferocity that often left their opponents breathless. For fans, they were warriors, gladiators on the pitch who gave everything for the badge. But perhaps the greatest legacy of the Millennium Falcons was that they laid the foundation for future generations. At a time when professional opportunities for African women were almost non-existent, players like Mercy Akide became trailblazers by moving abroad to playing leagues in the United States and Europe. Their sacrifices opened doors for Nigerian players to dream of careers beyond the local leagues. They carried Africa on their shoulders and proved that Nigerian women could not only dominate at home but also shine on the global stage. Fast forward to the present day, and the conversation has shifted to a new crop of stars, the Gen Z Super Falcons. Unlike the pioneers of the Millennium era, these players grew up in a world where women's football has more recognition, better resources, and a more defined pathway to professionalism. They are products of academies, global scouting, and advanced coaching. And with them, Nigeria's women's football has entered a new era of tactical refinement and international influence. Leading this generation is Asisat Oshola, widely regarded as one of the greatest African players of all time. A 5-time African Women's Footballer of the Year, Champions League winner with Barcelona, and a global icon, Oshola embodies the Gen Z Falcons. She is not just a footballer but a brand, with global endorsements and a following that extends far beyond Nigeria. Alongside her are stars like Rasheedat Ajibade, the charismatic forward from Atletico Madrid who combines flair with leadership, Chiamaka Nnadozie, a goalkeeper ranked among the best in the world, who has saved crucial penalties on the grandest stage, and younger names like Gift Monday and Esther Okoronkwo, who represent the rising tide of Nigerian talent making waves abroad. The achievements of the Gen Z Falcons may not yet include a World Cup semi-final or final, but they have carved a reputation as a team that can stand up to the very best. At the 2023 Women's World Cup, Nigeria held Olympic champions Canada to a draw, stunned hosts Australia with a 3-2 win, and pushed England all the way to penalties in the round of 16. Unlike the Millennium, when Nigeria's approach was often seen as unstructured, this team played with tactical discipline, defensive organization, and technical quality. The global respect they earned was not accidental, it was the result of years of development and exposure to professional football in Europe's best leagues. Off the pitch, the Gen Z Falcons are also different. They are social media influencers, global ambassadors, and cultural icons. Their visibility on platforms like Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok has given them a reach that the Millennium Falcons could never have imagined. They are symbols of modern Nigerian youth, bold, expressive, unapologetic, and ambitious. For young girls across Africa, they are not just footballers but role models who prove that you can be talented, successful, and influential all at once. When comparing the two eras, several contrasts emerge. In terms of skill and technique, the Gen Z Falcons are far more polished. They have benefited from top coaching, advanced facilities, and regular competition against the best in Europe. On the other hand, the Millennium Falcons had unmatched physical strength and fighting spirit. They played in a tougher environment, with fewer resources, yet still dominated Africa and left a mark on the world stage. In terms of continental dominance, the Millennium Falcons were unrivaled. They simply swept Africa clean, leaving little room for rivals. Today, however, the rise of nations like South Africa and Morocco means the Gen Z Falcons face stiffer competition at home. Yet, on the global stage, the Gen Z Falcons appear more tactically prepared to challenge the traditional giants of women's football. Global recognition is another area where the contrast is clear. The Millennium Falcons were pioneers, but their recognition was limited compared to what the Gen Z Falcons now enjoy. Today's stars play for clubs like Barcelona, Atletico Madrid, and Paris FC, earning global attention and proving that Nigeria can produce world-class professionals. The Millennium Falcons may not have had the same level of exposure, but their legacy as trailblazers cannot be overstated. The debate ultimately comes down to preference. Do you value the pioneers who played with heart, raw power, and resilience, paving the way for the future? Or do you lean towards the Gen Z generation, who combine talent, tactical sophistication, and global branding to take Nigeria to new heights? One thing is certain, both eras deserve immense respect. The Millennium Falcons gave Nigeria its football identity, while the Gen Z Falcons are expanding that identity into global stardom. The torch has been passed from one generation to another, and together, they tell the story of a nation that has always refused to be ignored in the world of women's football. For Nigerian fans, this debate is more than just about football. It is about identity, pride, and legacy. The Millennium Falcons showed us what was possible when nobody believed in African women. The Gen Z Falcons are showing us what is possible when that belief is backed with professionalism and global support. Both generations are winners in their own right. But now, it is your turn to decide. If you had to pick one generation as your favorite, who would it be? The Millennium legends who built a foundation with blood, sweat, and courage, or the Gen Z queens who are carrying the flag to new global heights? The choice is yours, and whichever way you lean, one truth remains unshakable: the Super Falcons are, and will always be, the pride of Africa.